Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Standards and General Purposes Committee. Apologies for moving the venue at the last minute, but I was advised that the mics are not working in the committee room. I felt it would be better for us to be able to hear each other. So, item 1 is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
There's a number check. Councillor Pauline Cowper and Councillor Dave Ward is substituting, Councillor John Dehaney and Councillor Agatha Akadina and Councillor Marty Skeeter is substituting.
Well, welcome, substitutes. Item 2 is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations? No. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Are they agreed? Adam?
All the previous minutes, for point 1, apologies for absence, Councillor Omar Bush and Councillor Moulton were substitutes, but they don't appear on the present, slightly higher up on the page, so we could just get that amended, that'd be great.
We'll certainly do that. Any others? Okay, can we agree them with those amendments? Thank you. Item 4 is the final accounts, and what we've decided to do is ask the auditors to present their bit of this section first. So Suresh, would you like to introduce your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. So, last two audit committees I have come to tell you about the status of the audit and the reasons why we were unable to conclude that audit by the end of July initially, and then by the end of September, which was the kind of the next kind of target date that we had. The reports that I present to you this evening on the accounts is our report that outlines all the findings that we have now concluded the audit. So I'm pleased to say that subject to the outcome of tonight's discussion on the accounts, I will be signing an unqualified audit opinion tomorrow and an unqualified value for money conclusion, in addition to confirming that your whole government accounts submission is consistent with your audit accounts. Clearly, those two audit committees that I've attended to before have outlined the issues that we've identified with the council's accounts, particularly relating to the property, plant and equipment. And we do want to just highlight to the committee some of the detail on that, which I'm going to get Simon to do. So I'll just quickly update on the status on page 214. So all those items that we said were still subject to completion are now complete. On page 215, we summarise the audit differences that we've identified. As I said, Simon's going to take you through the property, plant and equipment, but you'll also see the differences we identified around income and expenditure and also around the pension liability. There are two unadjusted audit differences, which we've included detail within the report. One relates to creditors and another relates to the PFI scheme. But we are happy with management's assertion that they are not material to the accounts and so can remain unadjusted. I'll let Simon talk about the property, plant and equipment now and also some control observations, and then I'll come back to talk about the fee and then the recommendations that we've made in the report.
Thanks, Suresh. So if I could take members to page 221 of your papers, this sets out the most significant issue that we had on property, plant and equipment valuation. So our most significant findings are in relation to the assets that you carry at depreciated replacement cost, or DRC. As you can see from the table on that page, that's the largest component by value of your property, plant and equipment asset base. And those are assets that you consider to be specialised and in the main are made up of schools within the borough. We concentrate our audit attention on those assets because there is quite a high degree of subjectivity in terms of the way they are valued. As a result of our procedures, we identified three main areas of error, which are set out on page 222 of your papers. The first was the building cost information service index that you used to ascertain how much it would cost to rebuild the assets was incorrect and had been incorrectly indexed backwards. That resulted in an increase in the value of the carrying value of the assets at the balance sheet date of around 31.5 million. The second area of error related to asset lives and assumptions made around depreciation factors. That had an opposite effect and reduced the carrying value of assets as at the balance sheet date by around 30 million. The most significant error that we found was in relation to the valuation of built-on land. We found that to be understated, so the data that was used by the council needed to be updated and didn't reflect that the land could be used for was residential. That resulted in the carrying value of assets being understated by approximately 161 million as at the balance sheet date. As a result of our findings, we also made prior period adjustments to the financial statements. Those are set out on page 233 of the papers. And just to take you through those very quickly. So, at the end of 17/18, the total net book value of PPE was increased by 163 million as a result of our work. At the end of 16/17, the comparative period, the total net book value of PPE increased by approximately 174 million as a result of our work. And at the start of 15/16, so the start of the comparative period, the total net value of PPE increased by approximately 220 million as a result of our work. Those are the significant amendments that were made to the financial statements. The other thing that we wanted to talk to you about briefly, as Suresh suggested, is the control observations that we made in conducting the audit. They start on page 247 of your papers. And you can see on pages 248 and 249, we raised 4 control observations. 3 of those related in summary to legacy issues arising from the migration to your new E5 ledger system in February 2017. 1 related to close down arrangements this year and the need to improve those arrangements. In all cases, management has responded. We're satisfied that progress is being made in relation to the legacy issues from ledger migration, and in all cases we're content with the responses provided by management. So I'm going to pass back over to Suresh now, who's going to talk about the fee, I believe.
So I'll take it to page...
Have you got good news for us?
It's all on page 254, Chair. So again, at those 2 committees that I've been to earlier in the year, I have informed you about the impact of the additional work that we're required to carry out on our fee. Clearly at that stage, I was only able to estimate what the impact would be on those fees. The table on page 254 are the final fees that we have agreed with the Director of Corporate Services, and under the arrangements for carrying out your audit, we now need to get approval from public sector audit appointments for those fees. I can take questions now, I'll take it at the end on fees, but I just want to then wrap up with looking at the recommendations, Chair, if that's okay?
I think go on.
Yeah, so if I take you back to page 2...
I want to talk about the fees.
If I take you back to page 217, which summarises the 3 recommendations that we have made in respect of the audit. As you can see, for all 3, management have provided a response. So the first 2 focus on the issues around property, plant and equipment, and we're happy with the management's response. Clearly we'll be looking at that as a matter of urgency for 2018-19 to make sure that those actions are actually being implemented and being effective. And then the third recommendation is probably a more overarching recommendation around the arrangements to close down and prepare the accounts. And you can see the detailed response from management. Again, that will be an early area of focus. We've got a wash-up meeting planned with the finance team in early December. And as part of our audit next year, we will be carrying out early work on those areas that will cause problems this year. I'll stop there, Chair, and we'll take questions.
Are there any questions to the auditors? Adam? I'm going to put you straight
Thank
away.
you, Chair. I was genuinely surprised that no one else had any questions. But to begin with, in terms of the fee, whose fault would that sort of be in terms of going forward? How do we sort of like end up in a position where we aren't going to be incurring extra fees. And obviously, in terms of the timetable, obviously, I appreciate is that the statutory deadline is supposed to be done by the end of July, but obviously in terms of the framework, there isn't any sort of fines or stipulation. But obviously, going forward, how do we ensure that we meet that sort of timetable to ensure that it is signed up by the end of July, to ensure that we are meeting sort of our corporate governance effect? Thank you.
So in terms of the additional fees, so they are as a result of additional work that we have to carry out as a result of those issues that we've identified. So, you know, if you want to call it somebody's fault, it's obviously the issues that have arisen due to the valuations, but also due to some of the other issues that we've reported in the paper. The actions that the management have responded to our recommendations, if those are implemented effectively, then I would assume that would mean there wouldn't be a need for us to carry out additional work in 18-19. As far as meeting the end of July deadline, clearly that's something we'll be sitting down with Caroline and her team at the exact timetable. But what we are planning to do is to complete our audit at least by the middle of July, if not earlier next year, with a view to, if there are any issues that arise that we haven't, collectively thought about or weren't aware of, then we've got 2 weeks to resolve those issues before the end of July. So we're building a buffer into that timetable.
I should say that I've had discussions with the director and the auditors about this outside of this meeting, and I think I made my feelings crystal clear at the last meeting in terms of not having a repeat of this and learning lessons and making sure that plans were in place. And I think we all share that desire to meet the timetable, although I think there's also a recognition that the timetable has been considerably reduced, and that does put pressures on both the auditors, because they're required to complete that task for all the clients that they have and for our own staff in a shorter time scale. So, David.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for those comments as well, because for much less than £81,000, there's often been a lot of political bloodletting when we get to budgets. Maybe the answer is buried in the paperwork, and if it is, I apologise for that. But there is an additional item here for responding to a member of the public that's cost us £9,000. What's that all about?
So that was a matter that we received in relation to the council's transaction with Elim Church, and I've reported that at the prior committee, and it's summarised in the report under the value for money conclusion. But obviously, members of the public have a right to ask the auditor a question, and we have a duty then to consider that question and carry out sufficient procedures to ensure that there's no evidence of either unlawful activity or inappropriate activity on behalf of the council. So that cost is associated to the procedures we need to carry out in respect of that query or question.
Is there any provision on that for sort of any consideration of proportionality? Because it does, I understand there are jurisdictions where if somebody asks such a question, if the cost of gathering the information is considered much higher than the sums involved, then there is the ability to refuse on those grounds.
Yeah, there is that consideration that we make in terms of proportionality, and also whether or not something is vexatious. But clearly, for this particular case, we took that consideration and determined that we did need to investigate further.
Any other questions to the auditors? Sorry, there's one thing I wanted to add, actually, sort of, because David prompted me to say it, and that was, plans for next year. And I've questioned the auditors about whether they have sufficient resources. I've questioned our own staff about the plans to ensure that we have the team in place ready to do this work and complete it to the required deadline, and they have assured me, both of them have assured me, that that is the case, and I was grateful for that assurance, and I'm sure they will repeat it for the record and sign in blood before they leave this evening.
Sure, thank you. In terms of the valuation of the building and land, obviously that was brought up, restated, etc. In terms of prior year audit, what work was done to that? Was it something that wasn't sort of like tested last year in terms of even also a significant risk? I'm just sort of like struggling to see why wasn't this picked up in previous years rather than obviously having to restate now.
So this is an issue that's a bigger issue for the whole audit profession. So our regulators are increasingly focused on PPE valuation as an area that's subjective. So in prior periods, what we've done is treat the prior year figure as audited and look at the reasonableness of the movements in the year. This year we've taken a far more granular approach on the back of those regulatory findings to test in detail the assumptions and base data that inform the valuation. In doing that, we've found these issues. In terms of then making prior period adjustments, because we have found material error, we're required under International Auditing Standard, Accounting Standard 8, to go back and make adjustments to the prior period. We've tested the prior period and the adjustments made to the period before the prior period in making those adjustments.
But obviously the financial statements that were signed off last year were obviously giving an opinion that the financial statements are free from material misstatements. So obviously, how does that sort of impact on the sort of audit report this year? Obviously, if there was a material error in the prior year, that obviously wasn't picked up.
So that's the purpose of the prior period adjustment. So we don't reissue an opinion for the prior year. The accounts get restated, and our opinion for this year covers those three sets of prior period adjustments that we made.
And that actually brings me on to another question that I've put, and that is that if there are some changes in the methodology used that the auditors become aware of this time, or in advance of the audit next year, that they give us notice and warning of this, so that there is an opportunity for officers to get their heads around those changes and make sure that we're not at the end of the process before we realise that there's a mountain of work still to be done. Okay, are there any other questions to the auditors? Okay, do you want to deal with the issue of fees? You want us to agree to them, do you?
That would be nice, yes.
Okay, well, can we agree the fees with the greatest reluctance? Thank you. Caroline, would you like to add anything that you think is appropriate or necessary?
I suppose, thank you, Joe. The only thing I'd like to add is obviously we have re-provided as part of the papers the annual governance statement, and we have amended that to allow for the issue that arose with regards to the assets. So there is a new control in there, new actions arising from that, because we want to make sure that we're not in the same situation again going forward. So that has been re-provided and has been re-signed by the leader and the chief exec before coming in front of you tonight.
Thank you. So, can we approve the final accounts? Is that agreed? Thank you. I mean, there was a bit of me that was thinking that perhaps the sort of undervaluation might have been anticipating the consequences of Brexit, but I thought it's probably not wise to go there, so let's leave it at that, shall we? Item 5 is the internal audit progress report on the annual audit plan, and we have Andrew who's going to present that. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm standing in for Margaret Cullerton. This is the internal audit progress report that summarises work completed to the end of September 2018. I'll just take you through the brief highlights, and I'll be happy to take any questions at the end. So I think the report really starts at the table on page 330 at section 3.1, which details progress to date. So you'll notice that at the beginning of the year, the plan was agreed at 765 days and included 39 audits. And to the end of September, we have issued 25 reports, 7 draft reports, and there were 7 pieces of work in progress. We've completed 383 days. There's a typo in the table, I apologise for that. So essentially we've completed just over 50% of work, and we're about 50% in terms of days delivered. So we're well on track to deliver the programme of work by the end of the year. In terms of the reports that have been completed so far, of the 20 that have been finalised, 15 of those have been awarded a substantial assurance opinion, which is positive. There have been 2 limited opinions. 1 piece of work was advisory, and there were 2 grant claims. A list of those can be found on page 335, Appendix A. In terms of the 2 limited reports that we need to bring to your attention, they were, one was for the CN2000 system, which is an electronic care management system, and the second one was for service tenancies, which was a follow-up report. And there's a summary of findings and agreed actions, which can be found at Appendix B on page 337. In year, we've undertaken 7 additional reviews. These weren't included in the agreed plan. You can find them listed, or the list starts at the beginning or the bottom of page 331 and continues over the page. So this is work that's been requested by management during the year, or has been identified due to changing risk priorities in year. But as a result of that additional work, we will have to move some of the planned 2018-19 work into the 19-20 plan. And lastly from me is some words on follow-ups. So at the time that this report was written, 9% of recommendations or agreed actions have been implemented, and 10% were due to be implemented. And there were 6 audit actions which were overdue by more than 3 months. This goes through our escalation process, so that's now been escalated to director level, and the audit team will continue to progress those to completion, and we will report back at the next meeting. I think that's all from me, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any questions? David?
Well, it's slightly more of a comment, really, and you and some other of our colleagues who've been here for more than 1 term on the council will know that the 2 areas that we see tonight have limited assurance are areas which the council seems to struggle with year after year after year. I mean, issues with service tenancies and what I might just loosely call record keeping have just been the bane of this council's life, and certainly a great concern to councillors. We don't now have as many service tenancies than we used to, but we still somehow or other don't seem to be able to manage them effectively. And there are consequences which perhaps I would prefer to talk about in a private session, with regards to the nature of those tenancies and the rents being paid, etc., etc. I'm quite disappointed to see that it's still an issue. And I would say the same again about record keeping for adult social care payments. You and I know will remember when the social services section were running 2 systems. One was the cash, the financial side of it. The other was a management information system. And the managers were relying on one number, but the actual number and costs were coming through at quite a different level. which led to a £5 million hole in the adult social care budget 10 years or so ago. And so, yeah, I just feel compelled to point out to members that these are two areas that are causing constant problems. And I don't know if there's an officer, whether the director herself or another officer would wish to comment on that.
I've just given the director about 20 seconds notice that I'm going to ask her to respond to this. But I mean, one of my questions to supplement yours, David, is there somebody that will take specific responsibility for this, that you could perhaps appoint and delegate that task to, Caroline, and have that person come to this committee at some future stage to describe the progress that's been made and assure us that somebody is taking responsibility.
It's just unfortunate that James McGinley was here to answer the questions you may have had around the evaluation, but he's now left because the service tenancies are in his area. But certainly there has been some limited progress, and we are following up as to what does need to be done to make sure, because some of these issues have been around for a number of years, that we do get them resolved. And so that is in train. With regards to CM2000, there is a new push with the new contract that we've got to make sure that the providers go onto it, but we have to be careful how we manage the process of putting our new providers on there, purely due to the issues that we've got with regards to overall capacity. And obviously it's been in the news this week around one of the providers, Allied, potentially not having good success with its VCA arrangements, and therefore there could be some significant pressures there on us. We're working closely, it sort of straddles community and housing and my area, to make sure that we are utilising the best of the system. We want to make sure that the upgrade that comes in actually gives us benefits from both a safeguarding point of view and a financial point of view, that people are paying for the care that they are receiving, as well as making sure that people are turning up. So that's something that's very dear to both Hannah and my hearts, to make sure that we follow up on that. So we can see what comes back on CM2000 and agree who will take forward responsibility for that.
Okay, so would it be possible, given that James has departed, to ask him to prepare a brief paper describing, actually taking up David's point, the number of occasions in recent times where this has been reported, and the proposals to avoid this happening again in the future for the next meeting?
Yes.
Happy with that, David? Okay. Any other questions? No? We're letting you off very lightly here, Andrew. Probably because it's your first time there. Next time it'll be far worse. Okay. So, item 6 is the Fraud and Investigations Update Report, and Kevin, you're going to present that for us.
Thank you, Chair. So similar timing to the audit report, this is an update of the activity undertaken by the Fraud Partnership for Merton Council. The key tables that provide sort of results of what has been achieved in the year to date are probably on table 3 on page 343 and table 4 on page 344. In addition to the reactive fraud work, we also provide some proactive fraud drives and some fraud awareness training. And this year there was a launch of an online fraud training module for all officers. I'm told the launch so far, the technology is going down very well. It's better than some of our other partners in terms of the take up by officers completing it. And that might produce a spike in the level of referrals coming through to us. There are other details in the report. All local authorities are just about to go through the data submission stages for the National Fraud Initiative 2018. That's well underway, and I'm not aware of any issues in terms of the provision of data sets by Merton Council. I'm happy to take questions on the report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Ben.
Thank you for that. Just wondering if we could have, the numbers not in the report here, I don't think, the proportion of staff who are taking this training and if it's improved over the last couple of years, because you do conclude in the report that knowledge of fraud and its prevention in the council is good, but could it be better in terms of take-up of the training?
I apologise, I don't have those figures to hand. I think this is not something that's compared to, I think, previous year's training on it, for this online package, so I won't have comparators. I think in the first 6 weeks or so, I think there were over 500 officers who had gone through the training. So that was a good and encouraging start. I don't have an exact. I can get an exact figure to you.
Email that information to all committee members so that we've all got that answer. Thank you. Any other questions? Brenda?
Do we have enough, or do you have enough enforcement staff to ensure that the figures that you've got here are accurate in terms of tenancy in particular, given the situation with housing outside in the communities?
I'll probably answer that question in two parts. I mean, the first part, the provision for fraud or fraud prevention and fraud investigation, I think is accurate. Obviously, I think that we're all saying, probably, so you said, well, if we have more resource, we will be able to do more. We are managing reactive fraud referrals well, and I'm saying there's the capacity to deal with that. If resources were increased, then we would be doing more proactive work. Within the report, it alludes to local authorities and fraud teams generally in getting smarter with using data sensibly to be able to identify and tackle fraud, and actually in the housing area to be able to deal with it more effectively, so less officer input. So I think the resource for the authority is adequate. It compares with the other 4 authorities in the partnership, so it compares favourably there. But if we had more, then yes, we'd be doing more proactive work.
It would have been a big surprise if you'd said, when asked, would you like more resources? No thanks, I'm fine. Are there any other questions? David?
A bit like a broken record, but I have a bee in my bonnet about the misuse of blue badges, and I'm just stunned to see that there's only been one reported and actioned fraud case this year. Because, as Councillor Fraser and I are both magistrates, I'm sure she's also come across the prosecutions from other boroughs, where Wandsworth in particular are quite hot on in trying to ensure that people who are using blue badges are using them properly. Because there are many cases where people use their parents' blue badge to park near a railway station all day just to commute. I'm not quite sure how we identify those situations, whether it's parking services or what, but I don't understand why Merton seems not to prosecute as often as other boroughs do, because I just don't believe there's that lack of abuse in Merton compared with elsewhere.
You're correct in saying that in Wandsworth there is a high number of prosecutions, and as the fraud team we do get a higher volume of referrals from members of the public to us. But I'm aware of the council's interest and the council's interest in blue badge abuse. We are doing proactive work in Merton, and we are looking at the hotspots. So you quite rightly described that some of the larger stations where people commute into London are hotspots for blue badge abuse, and others. I think we others have been around colleges and hospitals, things like that, where we've done work in the past. There is, or I haven't had an update. There was supposed to be another case in court this week, so I'm still waiting to see whether it went to court, whether there was an outcome there. So there are some cases going through being prosecuted. But like I say, we will try more on the proactive work to pick them up, because we're not picking up the referrals to us.
I would certainly commend you. There's a 100% increase in the number of prosecutions if you go from 1 to 2. But I'd certainly like to see a more proactive approach, because I think there's nothing more irritating. Well, I'm sure there are more irritating things to people, but I think it's abuse of that kind of privilege to park without penalty on yellow lines or in residential bays and like is a very irritating thing to other members of law-abiding members of society.
Well, I mean, the obvious thing to do is, or the question to ask is, are we publicising these prosecutions? And it's one that's currently reaching a conclusion. Can we not do that to warn people of the consequences, potential consequences? And taking up David's point, and he has made it before, could we not have a bit of a blitz within a concentrated period and then publicise the outcome of that in order to encourage good behaviour?
I do take those on board. We have, it was last year, we did do a targeted exercise where we monitored an area where we thought we might identify people who were abusing the system, and unfortunately we didn't pick up any that way around. So we're looking at how we're targeting those. There was also a suggestion that prosecuting just a single prosecution might not be totally effective, so we were considering whether we would publish it as the prosecutions have been obtained by the fraud partnership, and that article could be released for across all partner authorities, and therefore the deterrent value that people have been caught hopefully will get out, and that's a stronger message. So I'll take that up with your comms teams and see how we can progress that.
When you do this, would you welcome suggestions from councillors about where they feel that there might be abuse going on?
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for that. The next item is the annual complaints report, and Karen, you're going to present that.
Yeah, hi, good evening everybody. I assume you've read the report, so I'm ready to take questions, or if you want me to go over the highlights to start with, I can do. Just
Not necessary, I think everyone's read the report, so we'll go straight to questions. Thank you. Any questions?
So obviously we have the complaints from 17-18 and on environment and regeneration as a rise on 60%, both stage 1 and stage 2 complaints. Are there any forecasts or initial figures for this year? And is there an expectation that they'll go up or down?
I would say we've seen a significant increase already in the last month, but up until about a month ago it was kind of on par. But the last month we've had a lot more.
For any particular reason? Or?
The introduction of the wheeled bins and people struggling with either recognising, when they need to put their stuff out, getting confused with the guidance, missed bins. There's a whole range of issues, and obviously because it's quite a complex area with, it's something, we have some roads where it's not all houses, you've got flats, so you've got different pickups, etc. So it's people getting used to it as well.
Thank you. Ben.
Thank you for that. I'm sure we all know why complaints might have gone up there. I was also interested to see the report from the local government ombudsman there as well, saying that was the case with all changed waste systems going outsourced, that they often saw those problems. My first question, if I can make two in this, would be what learnings from other boroughs in terms of their changeovers to outsourced waste services and their complaints procedure you've taken on board, but also, and I've raised this in a separate scrutiny meeting in the Sustainable Communities, where our integration with the Veolia and Ida Verde complaint systems hasn't quite updated. Veolia more advanced than the Ida Verde one, which is currently non-existent. Do you see that your ways of dealing with complaints would improve? How would you think they would improve once those systems are integrated properly?
I'll ask the director to answer that one.
The first one, which was, just remind me again, sorry. Apropos the complaints process, we have our standard complaints process in place. I think the learning was done pre that within the work that Environment and Regeneration did with how the NCOs did their engagement with people and the comms around that. So I think it was more done within the department. We were prepared for the increase because we'd had this significant increase in the previous year. But there was no actual change to how we dealt with our complaints.
But certainly from the lessons learned to the Sutton rollout, and there were extensive meetings held to learn those lessons, and that's why there was an increase in complaints capacity, there was an increase in customer contact capacity, an increase in officers and the NCOs going out and looking for the issues and trying to identify them and then work with the contractor. So certainly that was part of the lessons that were learned. With regards to the integration of the systems, we do hope that when the integrations are in place, there should be significantly less complaints coming through, because some of the issues are our website is wrong, but it's because the information we're pulling through from Veolia or Ida Verde is wrong, and trying to get them to correct that will then help. It's taken some time to get there, but there's conversations that Chris Lee, the director, is having with the both providers to make sure that they can upgrade their system to be able to integrate with ours, because we've made a lot of changes and a lot of improvements into our system to try and make sure that it's a better service for the resident, so that we know where they are. So we had to change the message if you rang up the contact centre to say if you're ringing about a food caddy bin, then we know that you are waiting for them, we will be delivering those over a certain period of time. So it's giving much better information to give back out to our residents as well once we get that seamless integration in place.
Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to what Caroline has just said, and I'm afraid I don't even agree with any of it. Because I've sent in letters, I've used the system, I've tried everything. And you don't get any answers most of the time. And like this week, and I'm not going to name names, but I had a response and I was really excited after about a month, asking about wheelie bins, and there's residents who are telling me I pay my tax, and how come they know where I live, but now with the bins they don't know where I am. And so something needs to be done, because the people on the street don't have the maps, it seems, so they don't know where the places are they're supposed to be delivering to. And it's very frustrating for us, well, for me anyway, I presume for other councillors having the same problem. It's been at least 4 weeks and the bins are still not delivered yet. Food bins, caddies, wheelie bins, they still haven't been delivered. Finally, email saying we've done it. Done it where? It hasn't gone to where it should go to. So something needs to be done.
I'm not sure that I want to turn this into a debate about sort of wheel bins. I take it, I understand that that's a big problem, and I myself have received complaints from a number of foxes who've been saying that since the plastic bags have been removed, the pickings are considerably down and they're all hungry. And on a more serious point, my own road and many parts of my ward, I find there's less debris after the bins have been picked up. So I think there are pros and cons, and I think there's always going to be a period when things are settling down and people are getting to grips with their new roles, new systems, and so on. But are there any other questions? Yes.
Okay, I have a question that's not about wheelie bins. In this report, you have a breakdown of the MP and member inquiries. Just wondering, you've got it broken down year by year and by department. I was wondering if it's possible to find out the split between members and MPs. Just sort of curious to find out if we're getting inquiries about similar things, really.
We can certainly change that for future reports, and we can get that information to you if you want. Yeah.
Any more questions? Ben?
A big part of how the public deal with their complaints is when they go onto the Merton website. And there's a mention in here about reviews about the website. I was wondering if someone could give me a little longer about if there is a plan for a larger change in the ways that people go onto the website to complain, or what are your findings of other reviews into this in the past?
At the moment, we take complaints via the phone, if people come in face to face, letter still, but mainly through the online form. And we were looking at introducing a CRM system, a customer relationship management system, but that didn't work for this part of dealing with the complaints process. And at the moment, it doesn't seem to be a problem with people accessing and being able to make complaints. So I'm not sure if that answers you.
Sorry, can I just, so have there been no, because I've received people from the public saying it's quite difficult to access how to get information and to actually complain about certain aspects of, but maybe this is what my earlier question was, getting maybe integration with our outsourced services would help, but in terms of our in-house services, do you think there'll be improvements to be made on the website?
Certainly we are looking to make it easier to be able to make some changes to the website. We've had a period where we've been not able to make direct changes to the website, and some of the search functions aren't working particularly well, and that's certainly what we want to improve, which may then help people to be able to find it easier to complain to us. So certainly that's something we'll sort of take away and make sure that it's clearer as to how they can, or how we signpost people to do that easier.
I was just wondering if it would be possible to have a certain timeline on, just a review of those changes to the website, and see, to kind of maybe an email to the members of this committee about what changes are being considered and when they'll be implemented.
I'll come back to you and let you know.
On page 3358, there are service areas, amount of compensation offered. You look at education and see 1,900. Is it possible in any way you could just give us a brief what that was for and how it ended up being there?
Sorry, I don't have the details of specifically what it was for. We normally just, in previous years, have just listed the amount of compensation that we paid for. but somebody had already flagged with me prior to this meeting that it would be handy to know that, so I've made a note that we'll add a column in to identify, because for instance it could be multiple payments in that area, or it could be one payment, so we'll add in a column to identify what the how many complaints it's in relation to, and also a very brief description of what it's compensating them for. Normally, with the local government ombudsman, it's for time and trouble, but we can put that in there for future reports.
And let members know what this current one was for. And let members know what this current one was for.
David.
And just prompted by questioning from other members, to make a comment and ask a question about those people who actually don't have access to the internet. I'll give you one example where I was ordering another street food caddy on behalf of someone, and one of the questions was, what's your email address? I'd already given the name, address and telephone number, but on the website it wouldn't actually let me go any further unless I put an email address in, so in the end I put my own in. Don't quite know what purpose it served, but we do need to sort of make sure that we have essential information, but if somebody doesn't have an email address, then they ought not to be that ought not to be a stop in the system. The second thing is mention of the phone. I certainly, a number of emails I've had about bids, inevitably, but people are saying, you know, I've rung or tried to ring the Civic Centre on a number of occasions and I'm 43 in the queue, 29 in the queue, and etc. And then, of course, they simply give up. So I'm wondering if Karen can help us, if she knows whether the telephone system is actually able to cope at the moment with the number of complaints that are coming in.
The number that comes through the contact centre I can't answer. The number that comes through direct to the complaints team, we don't have any fancy messaging. If the phone's engaged, people can leave a voicemail, because we're obviously a very small team. It's like just literally over 4 full-time equivalent staff, so we're not taking the bulk of those calls. We're taking the ones that either ring direct or get put through from the contact centre.
But certainly the customer contact centre had additional resources put in, and on the first sort of morning we recognised there was a particular peak, so we got additional staff in from within the council to help answer the phones, and we've been monitoring the calls, the number of abandoned calls, and made sure the messages were appropriate for people. So if they were reporting particular things, they were able to do it online if they had access to the online, and therefore we've been tracking that and making sure we had tracking when the peak calls were coming in, and therefore making sure there was a rota of staff to actually go on and answer those calls. The number of calls are coming down, but we are just still keeping an eye on it to make sure that we have sufficient resources to be able to answer those calls, because there's nothing more frustrating than people saying, you know, hearing your number 48 in the queue, but we are very clear around the length of time, the average length of time that people are waiting to be heard, and also the type of calls, the reasons for why they're being made, and making sure we're feeding back to the contractor and to Chris and his team to make sure the monitoring is then fed back to the providers as well.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, well, Karen, thank you for take the rest of the night off. Next item is item 8, that's annual gifts and hospitality report for members. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report which members will have last seen in November 2017, and is the update on the registers for declaration by medical and hospitality. We set out in the report a reminder of what the key rules are. Individual gifts over £25 in value, and also put in there some of excerpts from the guidance note that the Standards Committee completed in terms of whether hospitality should be accepted, and also what the Standards Committee is likely to consider an acceptable gift. In terms of the review of the register, bottom of page 395, there were 42 declarations made by 25 different councillors. I've done a summary there of where the gifts fell into. 14 were Wimbledon tickets, and other gifts were dinners and networking opportunities 6, Christmas gifts 1, sporting events 3, mayor's charity events 9, and borough events 9. The commentary really is the declarations and the spread of declarations seem to show there is a good knowledge by groups offices. It doesn't compare unfavourably with our figures last year, which was 22 members on 38 occasions, and the declarations from members across all the groups that we have. The nature of gifts hospitality and register don't appear in their entries to be outside of what one would perhaps expect councillors in different roles to be in receipt of such gifts and hospitality. The proposal is following this meeting. The recommendation is that we send a reminder out to members both of the gifts and hospitality rules that the Science Committee have in place, and also familiarity with the process for registering, and we'll also make sure that the office is supporting members and group officers are aware of those systems to ensure that members continue to declare this hospitality when they may be offered them. In the appendices, I'll say, put the actual registers and also the guidance. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Any questions to Paul? Okay, can we note the report? Thank you. Item 9 is also called to talk about the gifts and hospitality in relation to officers.
This is the report that we've just been through for members. This report also goes to the corporate management team to make sure that chief executive directors in their directorates are aware of the registers in their use. Again, the report sets out that the registers appear to be being used effectively. The level of declarations is, I think, low. But in some ways it has been historically. We've no reason to believe there are whole swathes of gifts and hospitality not being declared. And certainly CMT's recommendation was that the arrangements be again cascaded within directorates to managers to make sure we didn't lose sight of the requirements. And we set out the nature of the gifts and hospitality received. Again, there was nothing that struck us as being out of the order and what you might expect council officers to be offered.
Any questions to Paul? Okay, I mean, the thing, I agree that this does seem to be low, so how frequently do we remind officers of the need to report such things?
We generally do it once a year. So following this meeting, the corporate management team, we make sure there's a cascade in the management systems to remind people of those requirements.
Okay, thank you. So we note that. Item 10 is risk management. Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual report that we bring to the Standards and General Purposes Committee. We bring the strategy and the initial register to Cabinet and goes on to Council as part of approval of the business plan. There are regular updates by departmental management teams, we have a corporate risk management group, and feed through to CMT on a quarterly basis, amendments, updates, new emerging risks that we feel that we can sort of take off the register, as it were. It gives a flavour across the organisation of the different types of risks that we are managing, and also the fact that it's not just our financial risks but service, health and safety, reputation and the overall objectives of the council. There are mitigating actions in place for the majority of the risks. There are some where it can be very difficult to put some mitigating actions in because we may be dependent on third parties or central government for funding and things like that. But happy to take any questions, Chair.
Any questions?
It's actually an observation. Going forward, is it possible when we obviously get the pack for the key strategic risks to have the matrix in colour? It's obviously just a bit more helpful to spot out if we need something that's more towards the rear. I appreciate obviously printing costs, etc., but if possible, just on those few pages. Thank you.
Adam has clearly heard that austerity is over. We'll have a look at that and see if we can manage it within the available resources. Any other questions on that one? Okay, can we note that? Thank you. Item 11 is the appointment of an independent person. Amy, would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. So you'll find the report on page 449. Those of you that were here in March will remember that we brought this to you in March. Unfortunately, there were no applications received following that, so we're bringing it back to you, asking you to agree to appoint an interview panel with one councillor from each political group, and we've also given you details regarding a more targeted approach for the advertising. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Are there any questions? Okay, well, can we agree that? Thank you. Item 12 is complaints against members. Paul, you're going to give us a verbal update.
Thanks, Chair. Since the committee last met, Panama considered one complaint was received. It was made against the councillor on the basis that a letter had been written to the councillor raising issues about council policy and whether the council had a policy in place or not. The council referred the matter to the relevant officer to give a response, and a response hadn't been provided. Hannah and I considered that it wasn't a conduct matter in relation to the council's conduct, but we were very clear that a response was required, and we responded to the complaint on that basis, and also I've spoken and requested that the officer provides a response. It was quite a complex case, but so there was no finding there was any kind of need to investigate a breach of code of conduct on behalf of the council's conduct.
Any questions? Okay, we note that. Thank you. Item 13 is the work programme, which is on 453. Can we note that? Yes? Thank you. Item 14, we now need to resolve that the public are excluded from the meeting during the consideration of the following report on the grounds that it is exempt from disclosure for the reasons stated in the report. So with those members of the public still here, please withdraw and we can consider this item. Is Kim around? Whose camera is that at the back?
Thank you.
Okay, obviously the school standards panel is a very important panel because that's the panel which drills down into the detail of the Ofsted report. So where the school does have a downgrade in the Ofsted level, then the school standards board or panel will meet to discuss the matter with the head teacher and meet the chair of governors and so on. So I know it hasn't met for quite some time, but I would very much like that school standards board to meet as soon as possible and track the pipeline of the Ofsted inspection. So then I'm sure we'll be meeting with the school as soon as we can to discuss that Ofsted inspection report and see what we can do to improve and make sure they have a proper plan of improvement in place.
Do you want to come in, Jane? Oh, I know Dennis has got it.
So at the moment we're just trying to, we're liaising back with who's the chair to make sure we've got to take the what's there. So if we, so it is a bit delayed. If we don't manage to get one before Christmas, we'll have 2 next term. That's how we'll deal with it. And what we usually do is look at 2 schools who've had an inspection in each meeting, so that over the course of the year we look at 6 schools in depth and we make sure that the panel looks at a range of schools that have got a really good Ofsted outcome, those that have got a less good outcome, so that actually the panel gets a feel for what it's, goes out into school visits prior to the meeting, so they get a more in-depth feel for what's going on in terms of Ofsted.
May I? Yes. As I may have said before, I've been on that panel for 16 of the last 17 years and chaired it several times. And before Jane came, Jan Francis, they were dealing with one school who were struggling but weren't listening. They'd gone in, all the members of staff had put them, and Jan asked me as chair of the panel that year, can you go and talk to your friend and try and ask him to listen to us? And he was a friend of mine, but he didn't even listen to me. So what I'm saying is, if the schools and the school governing body aren't listening to the local authority, what can you do? Because the first time I was interviewed by an Ofsted inspector was mid-90s, and I've been interviewed several times since then of different schools. And although the inspections are getting shorter mostly, they're much more professional. The first time I knew more about what the conversation was about in the Ofsted inspection. Now they are very, very bright people. They're probably that anyway, but they really know their business and they really dig deep. And the fact that we have got such a success and a progress is a compliment to the schools and the local authorities. Thank you.
Okay. Right, thank you very much. We're going to move on to item 7 on page 91 of the report.
So this is for me to introduce. Ordinarily speaking, we would have our head of policy, partnerships and performance introducing this report, but it was his last day with us today, so we decided that he really didn't need to stay for any meeting, and we're in the process of recruiting a replacement. So you get me. So there's very little to say about this report because we met so recently, and therefore there's not been very much change in the last few weeks. There are a couple of things though that I would mention, which is that we would ordinarily in the departmental update now have the RAA. We agreed last time that the development of the regional adoption agency would form part of the departmental update. Nothing has moved on that since the last time we spoke to you about it. The paper that you saw last time goes to Cabinet on Monday next week. And so if you're wondering at all why the RAA didn't appear, it's just that there's literally nothing to say, but future departmental reports will of course include it. And then you've just got little teeny tiny updates for those areas where we think that there has been a little bit of change and movement, more considerable coverage of children's centres, just because that's a busier update. And councillors, I think, are concerned about the planning committee, so the Harris Academy had originally intended to go to planning in October, it's now going this month, That is still the plan and the intention, and we're very optimistic that that will get through. And if it is agreed at planning, then we are on course to open the doors when we expect it, although it will be very tight. If it doesn't go through planning, then I think we'll all be scratching our heads every time. Those are the kind of the principal issues to draw to your attention, and it's largely a no news update this month.
Can I ask Ellie or Haley wanted to add anything to the data? Yes, ma'am.
No, we had a chat about this earlier this week. We didn't feel there's that much movement really, to be honest with you. I think the key areas of concern are the same areas of concern that they were last month, and that's as far as well, I can see. Ellie agrees that that's been addressed in the report. Yeah.
So, are there any questions on the department update report?
Sorry, I was looking at it within the same line. I beg your pardon. Yes. If you've got any questions, anybody? That's all right. Off with you first.
Did anyone want to go before? I was just going to ask about Harris Wimbledon, as that's in the departmental update report. Obviously, there's some degree of concern among local residents that this school has been built in the middle of an area where there's very busy roads, and air pollution is a very big issue. Well, they're concerned about it's going to be a building site as well for about a dozen years with the redevelopment of Hyde Park. There's some concern, of course, that the schools may not be in the right place, but just in terms of air quality for a school at that location, and I don't know if our director can answer this, or if you may need to go to Tom Proctor, I think manages the build contracts and things like that. But in terms of the air filtration system for the air in the school, will it also include the carbon filter systems to pick up the NO2 pollution, or is it purely restricted to what you call the HEPA filters for the particulate matters? So I think I've got two questions. Are we going to have a proper air purification system that picks up the nitrogen dioxide in terms of carbon filters, and will the HEPA filters be suitable to pick up the PM 2.5, which the local residents are very concerned about as a matter of air quality?
I definitely can't answer that question. I'm looking at Tom Cross-Taylor. Are you in a position to provide any information, Tom?
Well, I can't answer the absolute detail and technicalities of it. It's a building project to be managed by the ESFA, but it's clearly going through the planning process, and I know that our air quality expert in ENR has looked at the application very carefully. The planning committee report was actually published this afternoon, so you can look at the detail of that to get a thorough answer and a thorough assessment of it. But the conclusion of it is, yes, whilst the surrounding area has pollution, they're satisfied that the school itself will satisfy all requirements, isn't a danger, and of course it will prevent a lot of people travelling further along the polluted roads by going to a local school.
It's in my ward, so obviously take a close interest in this. And I went to visit Merton Abbey recently, which is the school next to where the school is, the proposed school will be built, and talked about exactly this issue and what can be done about reducing the pupils' exposure to pollution. And we had some of the council experts and some of the GLA experts there. And we were talking then about how actually those filtration systems aren't actually the best. There's not much evidence yet that those kind of artificial filtration systems work very well. And what's much more effective is just having things there's lots of evidence about how pollutants kind of dissipate quite quickly when you get away from main roads where there's particularly idling traffic. As they're doing with Merton Abbey, they're looking at what they can do to reduce the pupils' exposure there. For example, I don't think this is confidential because it's done to a few councillors. They're considering temporary closures of streets, of the high path streets around school drop-off and pick-up time, which has been trialled in other councils. And if that works, then I don't know if that's a proposal that could be extended to the secondary school as well. Because contrary to what's going around a lot on social media, it's actually the high path which is the bigger issue rather than Ranton Way. Ranton Way is a main road, there's lots of free-flowing traffic. So high path is it's small road and lots of cars that are coming and kind of stopping and starting, which is actually a big issue. But I just wanted to update that Merton Abbey are looking at things to do to reduce pupil exposure, but will also benefit the school.
Thank you.
Could I just add to that? I don't want anyone sort of thinking that pupils in Merton Abbey are dangerously exposed at the moment. As part of that, the pollution guys did do some tests within the site of Merton Abbey, which I guess is similar to Harris and Morden, and everything was within safe levels. So it's the highways around it rather than actually on the site itself. So let's not think that the pupils in the school are actually have dangerous levels on the school site itself.
How is that tested? So how is that tested? Sorry, how is that actually tested in the school playground, for instance? So what measures, just for everybody's understanding, how do you know that's the case? What's used to be able to measure that?
Okay, again, it's outside my exact expertise, but there's a series normally of special machines that basically measure those rates of the various pollutants, and we have them across the highway network. I think there's at least 20 points throughout the borough, and those were brought onto the school site specifically for that reason, because these concerns have been addressed, and because Merton Abbey has been chosen as a special project in partnership with the GLA, and we're in a number of schools across London. So it's special equipment. It's not it's properly done through special equipment. I don't know the detail of it. It's not subjective measure. It's an objective measure of the various pollutants.
We had one successfully used in Lower Morden to do with an industrial estate, a particular business that they felt was polluting the atmosphere. And we even had a resident offer their garden to be one place to put one of the machines to measure it. So they take a bit of time, but they were effective.
Is it possible to actually get a copy of this report? Where would I get that from? Just the one from the Merton Abbey. I just think it'd be interesting because there's so much conversation with residents about this. I would really like to read that, see when it happened, see what was used, and just educate myself personally at least, so that I can actually see a copy of that, because it's public information.
Can you just answer? Is that possible to get from?
I don't know who currently holds it, so I'll follow that up.
I mean, let's be absolutely clear on this. All that data is publicly available. It's in the Merton Air Quality Plan, it's in the annual report as well, and you will see the diffusion tubes that measure nitrogen dioxide very clearly set out in Merton Way, Morden Road, Merton High Street, as well as the permanent monitoring station. And if you look at those readings, the legal limit, of course, for nitrogen dioxide is 14 micrograms per cubic metre, and all of the readings on all those three roads that surround that whole school area are in the 40s, 50s and 60s, and they are over the limit, and it needs to be understood that there is a very serious problem there, and it needs to be a priority. There needs to be an urgent course of resolution action to address it and consider it. So I don't think I've never seen a statement saying there's a diffusion tube which is to be placed inside the school. All the tubes are just surrounding the local roads, and all of the readings are extremely high and above the legal limits of the ones which I've seen. So we've worked in their quality plan and the report, and that's where you'll see all the readings are publicly available on our website.
Yeah, right. It hasn't been done before in schools. It was just done as a special exercise on a certain day as part of the project I just described. So you're absolutely right. As a routine, they are not located in schools like they are located on the highway network.
Just briefly on that, so back to publicly available information, that the Mayor of London's report on Merton Abbey is publicly available. You can go and take a look, and we've got that information because Merton and the school collaborated with the GLA and their consultants. And whilst you're there, that you can look at reports from other schools in other parts of London. So whilst I completely agree that the nitrogen oxide levels on the Ransomware and Morden are very high, if you pick some of the schools that are in Lambeth and Southwark, oh my gosh, they had minor back streets that are at the level that our Morden Road is at. So if we're worried about pollution at Abbey, perhaps we should be, then compared to other places just a few miles down the road, we're actually, it's not so much of an issue.
I thought, sorry, I won't debate it as much as I expected, but I thought that the Mayor of London's report was based on
the monitoring of the streets surrounding. And it's the first time I've actually heard that this is actually because of the results of that then we've actually moved those on to the south to the school. And that would be really interesting to see that south versus afterwards. Okay. But now that report would be really interesting to see.
I wonder if I could ask Tom, as there is quite a bit of concern about this, is it possible for you at a future date to come just and talk to us about this in more depth?
I think the appropriate person would be Jason Andrews, who is our pollution guy. We can certainly come along with him. I mean, as I said, it is a significant planning application consideration, and I'm sure it will be discussed in considerable detail next Thursday night when it goes to planning committee. But yes, certainly we could certainly ask him also to attend this committee on this.
I think
and see if he's willing to.
would people like that?
Yeah, because not just about him, but it affects other places in Merton as well. So
would you want January a report on schools, or I don't wish to. I mean, this has obviously become an issue because of the new school, but
I think it would be including the new school, but how it affects schools in Merton. Yes.
Because I mean, there is a specific section, I think, of the new air quality action plan on covering schools, so you can certainly cover that aspect.
I think that would be good for us to have. So could you liaise with Stella to arrange that? Is that all right? Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, are we suggesting that the planning decision be adjourned and put on hold then whilst it's
No,
reviewed?
goodness me, no. The planning goes ahead. This is for us as a separate committee. It's nothing to do with that. You're welcome to go to the planning meeting. When is it, Tom?
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday, Thursday, you can go and listen to it. Anybody can. You can go in there as an observer. But I'm talking about us as a separate committee and in no way impacting on that. Caroline.
Sorry, Chair. Just in case if it helps, but even before this whole planning, many people were asking me about the air quality in the area, and so when the consultation was held at, about the school, I went there and I put that to them, asked them a question about air pollution and what they're doing about it. On the plan, they showed me that there will be a long fence, from Merton Way, because many people are saying that there where the pollution is coming from, but there will be a long fence along Merton Way. There will be trees, and then followed by the back of the building. So whatever air pollution that is coming from Merton Way shouldn't really impact on the school. And also they will have some filters in the ceiling of the building, and so therefore the air that's coming in will be filtered. I mean, I'm just saying that because I think, we are all concerned about the health of our children, and I wanted to find out what they were doing, to improve the air quality for the school. And so I just thought I'd mention that.
No, thank you. And do we know how many trees are going to be planted around or in the vicinity of the school?
Certainly could not say that off the top of my head.
It was a very interesting article I read about the activity of trees at night. And something about they give off 48 pounds of oxygen from what it was quite. So that does help improve the whole issue.
You're absolutely right, Chair. There is a line of trees that divides the Merton Abbey Primary School and the new site for Harris Wimbledon, and that whole line of trees is going to be, unfortunately, chopped down.
Well, they could put some new ones
That's the
up.
council's plans at the moment.
But the plan is that they're going to have trees there, so maybe they will remove it for whatever reason for the building. I don't know, but the plan, what they told me, will have trees.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions?
Just an observation, Chair, really. It's all good talking about planning that. It's actually again the point of delivery and the quality of the build, and the SFA don't always have the best track record of delivering. So I'll just throw that into the mix. So actually, it's a monitoring of the build and future plan that's in there that's most important, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you.
So I would just like to say that I'm genuinely concerned about the air quality for all of the schools in our borough, and I really do hope that once we get that report, it does show that our children are at risk. You and everybody else on the council will support any measure we can do to reduce carbon emissions and all the really harmful things coming out of exhausts and things like that.
Would you advocate building a new school in an area known to be a pollution hotspot?
I think we're sort of going on now and getting a bit embedded where the decision's being made. It's all right, it's going to planning, but you've raised your point, Ed, and that's fine. And Tom is going to get someone to come back to us on it. Thank you very much. Right, I did squeeze in item 8 with 9 because I felt they married together, and to look at the work programs. There's on page 7, the performance report itself. Sorry, Rachel, I beg your pardon, the performance report on page 97.
So again, this one would usually we'd be led through it via partnerships, but we do have Kelly and Henry who would engage in that conversation, as I understand, about performance support. There's not a lot of movement since last time, but I'm happy to take any questions on it that you might like. I don't know whether either Henry or Amy has anything that they wish to add at this point.
As Katie said, like there's not been much change. Something of interest.
Just one brief question. Obviously, the figure that's missing is October 18. So at the moment, things like Ofsted inspections, we're saying we've got 91% which is good or outstanding. So given the change from the Ofsted inspection in October, is that going to include that change, or is it going to get that post change?
Any other questions? And the work programme on page 99, has everyone noted that, please?
I did, which was just an acknowledgement that at our last meeting we had a request to bring the micro action plan onto the programme. We haven't yet set a future date for that, I don't believe, so it's kind of done around with many other boards and committees, but I'm very happy to when we hear it's simply a decision about when we want to timetable it.
And just before we finish, after last...
Can I just ask, just based on that, when do we plan to bring it here? Because I think particularly with everything that's happened both in this but across London, you know, rather than discuss when, you know, purchase happened to bring it when
we don't get squeezed in. It's something that deserves decent timing. I don't know. Rachel, could perhaps we look at when it might be easiest to fit it in? Is there anything that perhaps could be put back? But I doubt it.
It's a little bit up to members and what members want to see. I mean, we've got a busy agenda on the January meeting date. We've got Sir Daniel Moynihan and Sarah Musgrave from the Harris Group attending. That's an unusual request, and I was pleased to see them accept it. So I think that's a commitment we would want to honour. There are routine elements of that agenda, such as performance monitoring and department update report. I wouldn't want us to slip the corporate parenting annual report. I don't think that feels an important element of children's.
No, I don't think we can.
So the alternative is to see it on the 13th of February, which is a slightly quieter agenda. I mean, you know, you have a busy work programme, so you're always busy, but we could certainly bring it in February.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was just going to ask ahead of this. So, yeah, I think it's absolutely brilliant that we got everyone coming to the meeting. And I think the aim of that is we focus on the new school, but we are going to talk more broadly about how this work in Merton, I hope. I just wonder if there's like any useful briefing or update that we can get ahead of that about when they took over the schools they took over and what performance of it. Just, you know, a bit more background information so that we can make sure it was scrutinised. I don't know if that's what I'm doing.
We haven't specifically had that wasn't what was on the...
So it was just going to be the school?
That was what they've been briefed on implementing. But that was in the work understanding the school.
I remember when we were initially having this levels, and I remember thinking it was going to be a very major player in our education system and running a lot of our schools now, and that I thought it was going to be much more. Because about the new schools, not much to say.
I think it would be perhaps unfair to spring it on them at that meeting when they're coming, but it is something we could bring forward, because I know that with the academies there is a lot of debate about how they kept their results as they were, and I know I got shot in the head a bit bringing up at one meeting, because they've got the BTEC, it counted as 5 GCSEs, but that's been abolished now. They cannot sort of produce better exam results by using the BTEC scheme as it was then. Jane, you know far more about this than I do, I'm sure, but it has been changed so that there, and I think you'll find the results sort of improved in comparison to other schools after this happened.
But there are other things they can do. Just this week, Harrods were named as one of the academy chains, still doing a fair bit of off-rolling. And I'd like to what you said about the issue.
Worst record in England for off-rolling. But that is public knowledge, and there's good data to support that.
Yeah, and new data just this week.
There is.
It does say that they will actually be covering some of the Harris Federation model for guaranteeing good and outstanding schools in the work programme already. But it also mentions a visit this month, potentially for us to go to.
Yes, that's right.
I don't know.
I haven't got a date yet, have we? Yeah, no, Stella, I have to say, Stella is doubling up at the moment.
Okay.
So she's got 2 lots of scrutiny to do.
I was just making sure that's up to something.
So, no, please, Stella, I'm very respectful. She is very organised and on the ball, but she is a bit stretched. She had a meeting last night till 10, and now she's sleeps tonight. But still getting it organised. So, if we can put that, thank you.
Okay.
I thought I recollected that we said that we would push the visit date back so that the visit was closer to that particular scrutiny committee when we had Harris attendees. If I've misremembered that, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I did think the push around that was happening in November had been reduced because we were having...
Perhaps that just needs to change on the plan then, that's all. You know, if that's the case, it's just with that in mind. I do think the topic of the life program is very important. I mean, would everybody, with team playing, you can ask these questions sometimes. Would it not be better to just extend the meeting on to it so we can cover it in January?
Well, we said about the February one.
I'm very relaxed about the timing. If the panel it's because the action plan is owned by the Safer and Stronger board. It's already been completed. It's already being enacted. Multiple different partners are engaged in that piece of work. So this isn't about the timing for us to produce anything. So if the panel wish to have that discussion at that point, then we can add it to the agenda. It doesn't generate new workload for us.
What I would like to say, one of my friend's sons was married a year ago, was Ed, you are as well. And it's been quite an emotive year for us all, especially for the family. But the boys from Rutledge, because he'd gone to Rutledge, and they'd lost 2 in 1 year, with not both studying, so. But the boys from Rutledge, they funded the headstone for Loni, and when I went to the year Thanksgiving service for him, they put forward they want to achieve something to prevent life crime, and this group of black youths want to work to stop knife crime. And Siobhan is working with Sally, that's the mother of Loni, and putting in touch with trying to form some sort of group, and Joan's been involved as well, she's met Sally, in Merton to work with youths vulnerable to perhaps knife crime. Now Loni didn't know the boy who murdered him, he didn't. And at the trial they never found out the reason why, and there was no remorse, they don't know at all. but these youths do want to do something, and I don't know if we could perhaps, I mean, it's a starting point, but it's something that's been born by our local youth, whether asking for some feedback from them of what they're doing, I don't know how they'd feel about it, but it is something that's going on.
I don't know, I mean, there is a huge amount of work going on. We can absolutely share the plan. We could investigate further what other things are going on and see what else we can bring forward. I certainly don't think we can do that for January, but I'm very happy to look at what's out there and how we might be able to involve young people in it.
Maybe with all that in mind, maybe February is probably a better date and just give that little bit of extra time. And then not leave things around when you've got the space of the agenda.
Is everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether or not we would invite the young man who would like to accept a Christian for one of our meetings.
That's what I was just saying. I can't remember his name. I know he's at the Thanksgiving service.
He's visited for us at the moment he's in university.
That's it. Quite a few from on.
Yeah, we had a meeting, and also I had spoke about getting involved in meetings all over police officers also. So where we need to get some more information on how to talk about setting up what he wants to do.
Can I make a further suggestion, which has just come to me, so it might be a bad idea. But we had a really successful first children's scrutiny in Local Democracy Week, and that was focused on the theme of crime. And those young people were very actively engaged in that debate. I'm absolutely not trying to derail or sidetrack this conversation, but I wonder whether you'd be willing to consider whether a follow-up young people scrutiny on this theme might be a really good way of engaging young people around this.
I think it's fun to engage. How do you?
It's a good idea, anything.
Is anyone got any other points they wish to make? Right, thank you very much. Sorry. Yeah, it's fine, Jim.
To come back to your point about having the information at Harris, I mean, certainly we could pull together something that said this is when these schools became Harris Academies, and it's in the public domain, the outcome, so we could just pull a briefing together that just gave you that overview of the other Harris schools to come to that meeting in January. That would be helpful.
If you think it's not appropriate for quizzing them on that, then that wouldn't be. I suppose
I don't know that it wouldn't be appropriate to ask some questions generally about the outcomes in other Harris Academies if there aren't any new ones. No, I don't think that would be appropriate. I think what we were thinking was to ask them to produce something to come in January might be, but we certainly could do a briefing and obviously let them know that that's what we've put it in content.
I don't want to produce lots of extra work.
I do struggle with this one a bit with the Harris Morden update because you've got the purpose and intended outcome, which is really clear, which is very practical things, and then the right to a possible external visit in that by Sudan, which looks as if it would become a sales pitch. And I don't think the two are sort of matching up for me, because actually the first one is about point of delivery and all the things you wanted about continuity, all the concerns that were raised in the development of Harris Morden. And on the briefing, I think needs to be key. And there are issues, aren't there, that we've seen across London with offloading of students. And actually, we're putting a spotlight on one academic provider when there are several in Merton that you should be looking at, maybe. And I know that's probably throwing a spanner in the works.
Well, Colin, I actually think if you feel, you obviously do, there are several in Merton which should be looked at. It's something that should be discussed with Rachel, Paul and Jane.
I suppose what we did was we responded to the original work programme agenda setting discussion where the request, which is quite an unusual one I think, was made, and it was specific in relation to Harris, and the focus of that conversation, as members who were part of it will remember, was very much on Harris. And I don't disagree that there are other questions for the Academy Trust, and one could shape the work in various different directions. but we followed the lead of that conversation and made that request because that was what members decided that they wanted in the work programme at this stage. So I'm open to the prospect of doing a different piece of work at a later date. I think this is a very busy work programme this year, and so I would caution against broadening the brief for January.
I think you're quite right on that, but it's we've got up to, is it the March one, whether it could be, if you could make a note of it, and it's put on an agenda after that date, or after March? Yeah, after March. It would be, yeah, that we could have a look at. But no, I know there's a big report out about off-rolling, and academies are the biggest schools.
And it is Pam London issue about off-rolling and other schools that don't off-roll, often local authority schools that then pick up those children in the progress. So it's about this panel having transparency around what validated results really mean against the range of indicators. On our monitoring report, the secondary exclusions, does that include academies? Yes, thank you.
Is everyone satisfied? Right, thank you very much. The final agenda is item 5, school provision report, which is restricted, so I'm asking members of the public to leave. Thank you for coming though.